They said I was too junior to understand the numbers. Turns out I understood them perfectly, and that's exactly why they fired me. 3 months ago, I thought I'd landed my dream job as a junior analyst at Henderson Associates. I had no idea I was about to uncover the biggest fraud scheme in the company's 30-year history. Have you ever been punished for doing the right thing? Because that's exactly what happened to me, and what I did next changed everything. The spreadsheet showed irregular patterns in client transactions. What I didn't know was that my boss was watching me discover his dirty secret. I called my mom that night. "Ma, I think I found something big at work." She was so proud. My Daniel, always the honest one. My name is Daniel Martinez, and I'm 28 years old. Fresh out of my MBA program, I was hungry to prove myself in the financial analysis world. Henderson Associates wasn't just any firm. They managed portfolios worth over $500 million for high net worth clients. Getting hired there felt like winning the lottery. I threw myself into the work with everything I had. While other junior analysts left at 6 p.m., I stayed until 2 a.m. perfecting quarterly reports. My desk became my second home, covered in printouts of transaction data and multiple monitors displaying endless spreadsheets. The numbers spoke to me in a way that made sense. Every decimal point, every transfer, every account balance told a story. I developed my own system for tracking patterns, creating algorithms that could spot anomalies in client accounts faster than anyone else in the department. "Martinez, you're making the rest of us look bad," my colleague Jake would joke as he packed up his things while I was still deep in analysis mode. But I didn't care about looking good to my peers. I cared about getting home to see my daughter Sophia's face light up when I walked through the door. The problem was, by the time I got home, she was already asleep. "Daniel, mijo, you're going to burn yourself out," my wife Maria would say, finding me hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table at midnight. "Sophia asked me today why Daddy only lives here on weekends." That hit harder than any criticism from my supervisors ever could. I was missing bedtime stories, morning breakfasts, and those precious moments when Sophia would run to the door yelling, "Daddy's home." The guilt ate at me, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. Once I proved myself, once I got that promotion, I'd have more flexibility. My direct supervisor was Richard Thompson, a 15-year veteran of the firm with perfectly styled gray hair and a corner office that screamed success. During my first week, he'd taken me under his wing, explaining the intricacies of high-value client management. "The key to success here, Martinez, is understanding that our clients aren't just numbers on a screen. They're relationships. Some of these accounts have been with us longer than you've been alive." Richard seemed genuinely invested in my development. He'd stop by my desk regularly, asking about my progress and offering insights that weren't in any manual. When I stayed late, he'd order dinner for the team still working. It felt like I had a mentor who actually cared about my career trajectory. That's what made what happened next so devastating. It started with the VIP client accounts. These were the crown jewels of Henderson Associates, accounts worth millions that generated massive fees for the firm. As part of my training, I was assigned to review transaction patterns for compliance purposes, basically a routine check to ensure everything looked normal. Most junior analysts would glance through the reports, check a few boxes, and move on. But I couldn't help myself. I dove deep into the data, building my own analysis models to better understand client behavior patterns. That's when I noticed something odd. Three of our highest value clients were making transfers in perfectly round numbers: $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 at regular intervals. On the surface, this might not seem unusual, but in my experience, organic transactions are messy. Real people transfer $47,832.15 to pay off a loan, or $132,247.89 to purchase property. Perfect round numbers at perfect intervals. That's algorithmic. That's planned. I dug deeper, cross-referencing the timing of these transfers with market movements, tax seasons, and major life events that might explain the patterns. Nothing matched. These transactions seemed to exist in a vacuum, completely disconnected from any logical financial planning. The really strange part was the destination accounts. They were all registered to shell companies with names like Meridian Holdings LLC and Pacific Investment Solutions. When I tried to research these companies, I found practically nothing. No websites, no business addresses beyond P.O. boxes, no employee records. You're overthinking this, Martinez, I told myself. You're new here. Maybe this is normal for ultra-high net worth clients. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. During my lunch break, I called my mom. "Mommy, I think I found something important at work," I said in Spanish, sitting in my car in the parking garage. "¿Qué es, mijo? You sound worried." I can't really explain it over the phone, but what would you do if you discovered something at work that didn't seem right, but you weren't sure if you should say anything? My mother was quiet for a moment. She'd worked as a bookkeeper for 30 years before retiring, and she'd always taught me to pay attention to details others might miss. "Mi hijo siempre hace lo correcto," she finally said. My son always does the right thing. If something doesn't feel right, you trust your instincts. But you also protect yourself. You understand? I understood perfectly. That afternoon, I decided to compile everything I'd found into a comprehensive report. If I was wrong, at least I'd have done my due diligence. If I was right, well, I hadn't thought that far ahead yet. Working late that night, I noticed Richard walking past my desk more frequently than usual. He'd slow down, glance at my screen, then continue on. The third time it happened, he stopped completely. "Burning the midnight oil again, Martinez. What's got your attention tonight?" "Just reviewing the VIP client portfolio for the quarterly compliance check," I replied, minimizing the window with my detailed analysis. "Find anything interesting?" His tone was casual, but something in his eyes seemed different, more alert. "Nothing out of the ordinary so far. Just familiarizing myself with the account structures." Richard nodded slowly. "Good, good. Remember, these clients have very sophisticated financial strategies. What might look unusual to someone with less experience is often just advanced wealth management. We don't want to raise unnecessary red flags over standard industry practices." After he walked away, I sat in the empty office feeling uneasy. It was the first time Richard had ever suggested I might not understand something, and it felt like a warning disguised as guidance. I spent the weekend digging even deeper into the patterns I'd discovered. Using my personal laptop at home, I cross-referenced public records, business filings, and financial databases that weren't accessible through the company's systems. What I found made my stomach drop. The shell companies receiving the transfers were all incorporated within the same 2-week period, 18 months ago. They all used the same registered agent service. And most damning of all, the business addresses listed for 2 of them were the same as properties owned by Richard Thompson's family trust. This wasn't sophisticated wealth management. This was money laundering. By Sunday night, I had compiled a 47-page report with transaction records, corporate filings, property records, and a detailed timeline showing how $2.3 million had been systematically moved through fake companies over the past year and a half. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those perfect round numbers marching across spreadsheets like soldiers in formation. By morning, I had convinced myself I was right, but I was terrified of what that meant. "You look terrible, Amer," Maria said as I sat at the breakfast table, staring at my coffee without drinking it. Sophia climbed onto my lap, her tiny hands framing my face. "Daddy, why are you so quiet?" I looked into my daughter's innocent eyes and felt the weight of the decision I was about to make. "Daddy just learned something very important about right and wrong, Mija. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to do the right thing." "Are you going to be a superhero like Captain America?" she asked, completely serious. I laughed despite everything. "Something like that, princess." Monday morning, I requested a meeting with Richard. His assistant said he had an opening at 2 p.m., which gave me 4 hours to rehearse what I was going to say and triple-check my evidence. At exactly 2 p.m., I knocked on Richard's office door, carrying a manila folder that felt heavier than it had any right to. "Come in, Martinez. Close the door behind you." Richard's office was immaculate as always. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, family photos positioned perfectly to show visiting clients how successful and stable he was. I'd always admired this office, dreamed of having one like it someday. "Have a seat. What's on your mind?" I opened the folder and placed the first page of my report on his desk. "Sir, I found some irregularities in the VIP client accounts that I think we need to discuss." Richard's expression didn't change, but I watched his hand freeze halfway to his coffee cup. "What kind of irregularities?" "Transaction patterns that don't align with normal client behavior. Large transfers in round numbers to companies that appear to be shells. I've documented everything here." I slid the full report across his desk. Richard picked it up, and I watched his face change as he flipped through the pages. His professional composure cracked just slightly, a tightening around his eyes, a barely perceptible tremor in his hands. After what felt like an eternity, he set the report down and looked directly at me. "These clients are too valuable. Let it go." The words hit me like a physical blow. There was no discussion of my findings, no request for clarification, no suggestion that I might be mistaken. Just an order to ignore what was clearly financial crime. "Sir, I don't think you understand. This appears to be money laundering. We have a legal obligation to—" "Martinez." His voice was ice cold now. "You're too junior to understand the complexities of high net worth client relationships. These people have financial strategies that go back generations. What looks irregular to you is simply sophisticated wealth management that's beyond your current level of expertise." I felt my face flush. "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, I've traced these funds to shell companies that you have personal connections to. This isn't about my experience level." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Richard stood up slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the city skyline. "This industry is smaller than you think, Martinez. Reputations matter. Careers can be made or destroyed by a single conversation with the right person." He turned back to face me. "I'd hate to see a promising young analyst make a career-limiting mistake because he didn't understand when to exercise discretion." The threat was crystal clear, even wrapped in corporate speak. I gathered my copy of the report and stood up. "Sir, this is fraud. We have to report it to compliance. It's not just company policy. It's federal law." Richard walked back to his desk, his movements deliberate and controlled. He picked up my report and dropped it into his paper shredder. "Take the weekend to think about your future here, Martinez. Sometimes the smart play is knowing when not to play at all." I left his office, feeling like I'd just stepped off a cliff. My hands were shaking as I returned to my desk, and I couldn't focus on anything for the rest of the day. That evening, I told Maria everything. "They want you to cover up stealing?" she asked, incredulous. "Daniel, you have to report this. You have to." "I know, Amr, but he threatened my career. What if he's right? What if I'm blacklisted from the entire industry?" Maria took my hands in hers. "Mi amor, do you remember what your father used to say? A man who compromises his integrity for money has sold the only thing that can't be bought back." She was right, and I knew it. But knowing the right thing to do and having the courage to do it are two very different things. I spent the weekend creating backup copies of all my evidence, uploading everything to secure cloud storage, and researching whistleblower protections. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. Monday morning arrived with an email marked urgent in my inbox. "Daniel, please come to my office immediately. Richard." I knew what was coming before I walked through his door. "Martinez, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Due to recent restructuring decisions made by the board, we're going to have to let you go, effective immediately." "Restructuring reasons," I repeated flatly. "Budget cuts across all departments. Nothing personal, you understand. HR will be in touch about your final paycheck and benefits transition." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I understand, sir. I'm sorry it worked out this way, Martinez. You have talent. I hope you find a position that's a better fit for your particular skill set." Security escorted me back to my desk to clear out my personal belongings. Jake looked shocked as I packed my things into a cardboard box. "Dude, what happened? I thought you were the golden boy around here." "Budget cuts," I said, repeating the company line. But as I walked toward the elevator, carrying my box of personal items, I made a detour. The compliance office was on the 3rd floor, and I knew Sarah Chen, the compliance director, would still be in her office. I knocked on her door and walked in without waiting for permission. "Daniel, I heard about the layoffs. I'm so sorry." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope containing copies of everything: transaction records, corporate filings, my complete analysis, and documentation of Richard's order to ignore the evidence. "Sarah, you might find this interesting. I'd recommend reviewing it carefully and considering whether it requires reporting to federal authorities." I placed the envelope on her desk and walked out without another word. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby for the last time, I felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. I had no idea if what I'd just done would lead to justice or destroy my career, but I knew I'd be able to look at myself in the mirror tomorrow morning. And when Sophia asked me what Daddy did at work today, I'd have an answer I could be proud of. 2 weeks after dropping that envelope on Sarah Chen's desk, I was sitting in my home office in sweatpants, sending out resumes and questioning every decision I'd ever made. The silence from Henderson Associates was deafening. No follow-up calls, no requests for additional information, nothing. "Maybe I was wrong," I told Maria over breakfast. Maybe I just destroyed my career over a misunderstanding. She squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, Daniel. Sometimes doing right takes time to show results. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Martinez, this is Agent Rebecca Walsh with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to speak with you about some information you provided to Henderson and Associates Compliance Department. My heart stopped. Yes, ma'am. When would you like to meet? Today, if possible. Are you available this afternoon? 3 hours later, I was sitting across from Agent Walsh and Agent Kevin Park in a nondescript office building downtown. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and had the kind of fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly sick. Mr. Martinez, we want you to know that Sarah Chen forwarded your documentation to us immediately after reviewing it. What you uncovered appears to be part of a much larger operation than we initially suspected. Agent Walsh opened a thick folder and spread out documents I recognized, my transaction analyses, but with additional notes and connections I'd never seen. We've been investigating unusual financial activity in this region for 8 months. Your evidence provided the missing pieces we needed to understand the full scope of the operation. Agent Park leaned forward. We're looking at approximately $15 million that's been laundered through various shell companies over the past 3 years. Your boss, Richard Thompson, appears to be the primary facilitator. $15 million. My $2.3 million discovery was just the tip of the iceberg. What happens now? I asked. Now we build a case, and we're going to need your help. The next morning, I woke up to missed calls from my former colleagues. Jake had texted, "Dude, federal agents are all over the office. What the hell is going on?" I turned on the local news and nearly choked on my coffee. There, on Channel 7's morning broadcast, was footage of FBI agents carrying boxes out of Henderson and Associates. Federal investigators raided the offices of Henderson and Associates investment firm early this morning in connection with an ongoing financial crimes investigation. The firm manages over $500 million in client assets. My phone exploded with calls. Maria came running from the kitchen. "Daniel, you're on the news." Not directly, but the reporter mentioned that the investigation had been triggered by a whistleblower report. I watched Richard Thompson walking past the cameras with his lawyer, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his face gray with stress. Sophia bounced into the living room, saw the TV, and pointed excitedly. "Daddy, it's the place where you used to work." "Yes, mija. Remember how Daddy said sometimes we have to fight bad people? Well, the good guys are winning." Her face lit up with pure joy. "You are like Captain America." If only she knew how terrified Captain America felt watching his former workplace being treated like a crime scene. Over the next few days, the story exploded. The local business journal ran a front-page story. Henderson and Associates under federal investigation for money laundering. The regional news picked it up, then the financial press. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting quotes, former colleagues asking what I knew, headhunters suddenly very interested in my resume. I declined all media requests on advice from the FBI, but I did take the headhunter calls. "Mr. Martinez, I represent several firms that are very interested in your analytical skills," said Jennifer Brooks from Executive Search Solutions. "Your reputation for thorough due diligence has gotten around." Reputation for thorough due diligence. That was certainly one way to phrase whistleblower who destroyed his former employer. "I have 3 firms, that would like to interview you this week. One of them is offering a 40% increase over your previous salary. 40% more than Henderson had paid me. Plus, these firms knew exactly why I'd left my previous job. Instead of being blacklisted, I was suddenly in demand. But the best call came from an unexpected source. Daniel, this is Tom Rodriguez from Martinez, Chen and Associates. I recognize the name. A mid-sized firm with an excellent reputation for ethical practices. Tom Rodriguez had left a big Wall Street firm 5 years ago to start his own company, focusing on transparent fee structures and client-first policies. I've been following the Henderson situation, and I have to say, what you did took guts. I'd like to offer you a position as Senior Financial Analyst, with a focus on compliance and fraud detection. Senior Analyst. I'd skipped right over the intermediate levels I'd expected to grind through for years. Mr. Rodriguez, I appreciate the offer, but I have to ask, doesn't hiring the guy who brought down his last employer make you nervous? Tom laughed. Are you kidding? It makes me want to hire you more. I want someone on my team who won't look the other way when something's wrong. Plus, your analytical skills are clearly exceptional. You caught something that had been hidden for years. I accepted the position that afternoon. Meanwhile, the investigation continued to unfold like a slow-motion explosion. Each day brought new revelations about the scope of Richard's operation. Local news reported that shell companies connected to Henderson Associates had been identified in 3 different states, with money flows extending far beyond what I'd originally discovered. The most shocking revelation came during my second interview with the FBI. Mr. Martinez, we need to ask you about any contact you've had with Richard Thompson since leaving Henderson Associates. None whatsoever. Why? Agent Walsh exchanged glances with Agent Park. Because he's been making inquiries about you. We have evidence that he hired a private investigator to look into your background, your family, your financial situation. The blood drained from my face. Is my family in danger? We don't believe so, but we wanted you to be aware. Thompson appears to be trying to find leverage against you. Anything he could use to discredit your testimony when this goes to trial. Trial. The word hit me like a brick. This is definitely going to trial? Oh yes. We have enough evidence to charge Thompson with multiple felonies, money laundering, fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. Your documentation started it, but we've uncovered so much more. They showed me surveillance photos of Richard meeting with known money launderers, wiretapped phone conversations where he discussed moving problem accounts, and email evidence of him instructing subordinates to alter transaction records. He tried to cover his tracks after you were fired, but he was sloppy. Panicked people make mistakes. That evening, I sat Maria and Sophia down for a serious conversation. Mijas, there's something I need to tell you. The bad people Daddy helped catch might try to scare us or say mean things about our family, but the police are watching out for us, and everything is going to be okay. Sophia's eyes went wide. Are we going to have bodyguards like in the movies? Not exactly, Princess, but the good guys are making sure we're safe. Maria was more practical. What does this mean for your new job? Tom Rodriguez knows everything. He's actually more supportive because of it. He wants to build a firm that does things the right way. 6 weeks after the raid, the indictments came down. Richard Thompson was charged with 15 felony counts, including money laundering, fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The maximum sentence was over 200 years, though realistically, he'd face 15-20 years if convicted on all counts. The news coverage was intense. Richard's perp walk was broadcast on every local station, and the business community was in shock. Henderson Associates had been a respected firm for 3 decades. No one had suspected that senior management was facilitating massive financial crimes. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Richard hadn't been working alone. We've identified at least 6 other firms that appear to be part of this network, Agent Walsh explained during my prep session for testimony. Your evidence opened up an investigation that's exposing systematic corruption across the entire regional financial services industry. 3 other investment firms were raided over the following month. 17 people were ultimately indicted. The local financial press started calling it the biggest white-collar crime bust in state history, and at the center of it all was the 28-year-old junior analyst who'd noticed that some numbers were too perfect. My first day at Martinez, Chen and Associates felt surreal. Instead of the corporate sterility of Henderson, this office buzzed with energy and collaboration. Tom Rodriguez introduced me to the team as the guy who's going to help us build the gold standard for compliance and ethical practices. Daniel's going to lead our new fraud detection and prevention department, Tom announced at the morning meeting. He's already prevented more financial crime than most analysts see in their entire careers. The other analysts looked at me with a mixture of respect and curiosity. I was the same age as most of them, but my experience had fast-tracked me into a senior role. Any advice for those of us still learning the ropes? Asked Sarah Kim, a junior analyst fresh out of graduate school. Trust your instincts, I said. If something feels wrong, dig deeper. And never let anyone tell you you're too junior to understand right from wrong. My new position came with a corner office, a 40% salary increase, and equity in the firm. More importantly, it came with the explicit mandate to investigate anything that seemed suspicious, regardless of client value or relationship importance. On my 3rd day, Tom stopped by my office with a bottle of champagne. What's this for? The SEC just announced their whistleblower reward for the Henderson case. You're getting $1.2 million. I stared at him in shock. I'm sorry, what? Federal law requires the SEC to pay whistleblowers 10 to 30% of recovered funds in cases like this. They recovered $8 million so far, and that number's going up. You just became a millionaire, my friend. I called Maria immediately. Amor, sit down. I have news. Good news or bad news? Because I can't handle any more bad news. The government is paying me $1.2 million for reporting Richard. Silence. Then screaming. Then crying. Then Sophia asking why Mommy was crying happy tears. That weekend, we took Sophia to Disneyland for the first time. As I watched her face light up on the carousel, I thought about the choice I'd made in Richard's office that day. I could have looked the other way, kept my job, avoided all the stress and uncertainty. But I also would have missed this moment, watching my daughter's pure joy, knowing that I'd taught her the most important lesson possible, that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, is always worth it. The trial began 18 months later. I was the prosecution's star witness, testifying for 2 full days about my analysis, my discovery of the fraud, and Richard's order to ignore it. Richard's defense team tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. but the evidence was overwhelming. Audio recordings, email trails, financial documentation. Everything supported my testimony. The moment that defined the entire trial came during cross-examination. Richard's attorney, a sharp-dressed man who'd probably never earned an honest dollar in his life, tried to rattle me. "Mr. Martinez, isn't it true that you were fired for poor performance?" "No, sir. I was fired the day after I reported evidence of money laundering to my supervisor." "And you expect this jury to believe that a junior analyst with less than 6 months of experience could detect sophisticated financial strategies that senior management couldn't?" I looked directly at Richard, sitting at the defense table. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Sir, it wasn't sophisticated. It was just theft with extra steps. And yes, I expect the jury to believe that anyone can tell the difference between right and wrong, regardless of their experience level." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Richard Thompson was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $23 million in restitution. Henderson Associates was dissolved, with remaining assets distributed to defrauded clients. But the real victory wasn't Richard's conviction. It was the systemic change that followed. The case became a textbook study in business schools across the country. New federal regulations were implemented requiring enhanced whistleblower protections for financial services employees. 3 major firms in our region implemented compliance programs based on the detection methods I'd developed. Most importantly, young analysts now know they have support when they discover wrongdoing. Tom and I started an annual scholarship for finance students who demonstrate commitment to ethical practices. We call it the Trust Your Numbers Scholarship. 5 years later, I was promoted to Chief Compliance Officer at Martinez, Chen and Associates, which had grown into one of the most respected firms in the region. We manage over $200 million in assets, and we've never had a single compliance violation. Sophia is 10 now, and she loves telling people that her daddy catches bad guys with math. She's already showing an aptitude for numbers, and she asked me to teach her about spreadsheets and financial analysis. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to catch bad guys just like you." Remember, Mia, the most important tool for catching bad guys isn't fancy computer programs or complicated formulas. It's having the courage to speak up when something's wrong. Last month, I received a letter from a junior analyst at a firm in Chicago. She'd discovered irregularities in client accounts and wasn't sure what to do. Her supervisor had told her to focus on her real work instead of asking questions. I called her that same day. "Trust your instincts," I told her. "If something feels wrong, it probably is. And remember, you're not too junior to understand right from wrong." 3 weeks later, her tip led to the exposure of a $50 million embezzlement scheme. She's now being recruited by top firms across the country. The ripple effects never stop spreading. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed Richard's order that day. If I'd let it go, focused on keeping my head down and building my career the safe way, I probably would have gotten promoted eventually, made decent money, had a comfortable life. But I would have spent every day knowing I'd chosen comfort over courage, security over integrity. I would have taught my daughter that some wrongs are too inconvenient to make right. Instead, she's growing up knowing that her father risked everything to do what was right, and that it was worth it, not just because of the money or the career advancement, but because standing up for what's right is the only way to sleep peacefully at night. That's a lesson worth more than any salary, any promotion, any amount of career security. And it's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.